The NBA regular season has just kicked off, and let's go to the cream of the crop, the team that, in my opinion, should be the clear favorites to win the NBA title, the current NBA champion, Denver Nuggets. Welcome to Chucking Darts, a podcast of informed, rigorous, reckless, harmless, speculative, and fun predictions about the game you love. You can call me Chuck. This is episode number 182. Episode number 181 was earlier this week. That was the last of my series of preview episodes for the regular season. That was with Trill Bro Dude from the You Know Ball podcast and Patreon. We talked about over-under locks. We talked about some awards picks. Just did sort of the cliched sort of fun podcast things that is happening this time of year. Shortly after that podcast was posted, the season tipped. Denver took on the Los Angeles Lakers in what I'm sure the Lakers would like to call a rivalry game in Denver. And they did much what they did in their series in the Western Conference Finals and were so crisp, looked like they had not skipped a beat, and reaffirmed, in my opinion, their status as title favorites. But what you hear all the time is that repeating's not easy. It's not easy. It's really hard to do. And so I wanted to go into their chances to do that and how they are trying to incorporate some young darts that they just drafted to rebuild and restock on the fly. To help me do it is a first-time guest that I'm very, very happy about. A man who is in the belly of the beast, Matt Brooks, at Matt Brooks NBA, writer and digital content provider for the Denver Nuggets organization. Matt, how are you?
I'm good. Excited to do this. This is I just finished rewatching. I was just telling you right now, but I just finished rewatching Lakers Nuggets finally. I'm doing this on a Thursday, so I got takes ready to go. You're catching me at the perfect time. Everything's fresh on my mind. I'm ready.
That's good, man. Nothing like on a personal note, there's nothing I like more than a guest that I can kick it to so that I can check my own tendency to ramble. So without any further ado, talk to me about this starting five, this game against LA, and why they seem so dominant heading into this season.
Oh, well, I think the big thing is there's the continuity of how well these guys know how to play together. And there was a sequence at the end of that game. They called timeout at about, I think, the 4:50 mark in the fourth quarter. And they came out and they ran a play. And it was essentially Jamal entering the ball to Jokic at the elbow, Jamal and KCP coming together, and then it's a split cut.
Split cut, yeah.
And Jokic kicks out to Jamal, three-pointer. And they run some variation of that for the next 3 or 4 plays every single time down. Do something different every time. One time it's a KCP flare screen coming out of a handoff, one dribble pull up. Next play, very similar flare screen. I think Jamal cuts through. KCP cuts through, and then Jamal actually takes the handoff, dribbles, jump off to Gordon in the dunker spot. That turns into a dunk, and it's just like these guys are so well versed and so familiar with each other, and their spacing is there and their familiarity is there. Their roles fit really well in that they have 2 guys that can, shoot the way, 3 guys really, Jamal, MPJ, and KCP, that can shoot so well, and Gordon, who's just so good at filling gaps. It's just like they just know exactly what to do. They don't even have to call a specific play. They just sort of have to put guys on the floor in certain areas, and they're going to get something good out of it every single time. It's pretty remarkable to watch. On the other side, I think their defense is way ahead of schedule. For what I was expecting, I just didn't know. I didn't know where the conditioning was. They looked so in sync. The way they were in these situations where Anthony Davis was rolling to the rim and they had somebody spaced in the corner and there was one guy tagging him and rotating back. Mm-hmm. They were so good in those situations. Everything's working on a string. Jokic is doing a great job of coming up to the level of the screens, taking up space. We're getting into a lot of terminology. What I'm really trying to say is they look so polished on both sides of the floor. And it's just like, it's remarkable. It's such a balanced team on both sides. And it's very rare where you have, it's not like a big 1 or a big 2 or a big 3. It's such a cliche, but it is truly like a big 5. It's miraculous.
No, I'm glad that's right where you went, because in recent, NBA history, when you think of these dominant teams that have repeated or have come very close to repeating, obviously the Durant and Steph Warriors are the most recent version of that. Even that team, you can count Iguodala, but Iguodala was kind of banged up for those playoff runs. They were a big four, and then there was like Zaza Pachulia. For the San Antonio Spurs, which, came within an eyelash of repeating, it was, Parker, Duncan, Kawhi, Danny Green. People forget this was like peak Danny Green before he went on to win,
Yep.
2 rings with other organizations. But that was his, peak 3-and-D ahead of the curve version. But then it was like Tiago Splitter. And you
Yep.
start to see this pattern where a lot throughout the last 10 years, you've heard this notion that like centers in the NBA are replaceable. I'm not here to really litigate that question, but it's certainly true that during the peak of those teams, there was not really a dominant 7-footer to like check them. Now we live in an era where there are multiple dominant 7-footers. The same 3 have been the top 3 candidates for MVP the previous 2 years. And it makes sense that like the team possibly of the decade, certainly the team that's best positioned for the rest of the decade, is one that has that dominant center, and everything else just is harmonious around him. And I think that, KCP's acquisition last season or before last season, obviously has been huge, been tremendous. And I think that I'm glad you mentioned him as one of the 3. You mentioned him in a class along with Murray and Porter, because as far as like quote unquote 5th starters go, he has a track record of being such a wonderful shooter and scorer that, to me, like, he deserves mention as not obviously as important as Jokic or Murray, but he's in the core. The core includes him 100%. And I love what you said about continuity as well, because continuity, again, traditionally in NBA terms, has been almost like fool's gold. Like, I can imagine in the mid 2010s, the Toronto Raptors preaching a bunch of continuity because they had the same group year after year. And what would tend to happen is that continuity is great, but when you run into a better player, like, it goes away. So Denver is lucky to have the best player, certainly, and to have a team that fits him so well. But again, now it's kind of like with the 7-footer thing. Since there is so little continuity throughout the rest of the NBA, so few cores are building and staying together,
Yep.
especially at the contender level, that it sticks out so much how polished the Nuggets are. Like, I was thinking about this title picture, and I really like the Lakers team. I think they are a good, deep team. And I think they did quite well for being formed on the fly in the middle of last season. But then, you watch this game 1 that they just played, and you remember like, oh yeah, like they did some like point center stuff with Anthony Davis at the top of the key in that game, and he's not that comfortable making decisions, and he doesn't quite know where his teammates are going to cut, and he doesn't quite know where his primary read should be. And when you mentioned how well they tag when he rolls, it's like, yeah, he doesn't know if immediately he's going to kick out or go up or what kind of shot he's going to shoot. There's just all these little, I don't mean to single out AD because I think it happens throughout any team that's newly formed, but there's just these little hesitations throughout a possession that the Nuggets just don't have. They are either very quick or they are surgically deliberate. And it sticks out that just so much above the rest of the league to me that I think they have to be considered the title favorite. So again, I said I want to check my tendency to ramble, but I'll say that just to get that question out of the way, is there anything about this team? I know like the bench is the cliched answer preseason. Is there anything about this team that you feel like, assuming health, fingers crossed, anything about the team's composition that you feel like could provide like a real bump in the road, a real challenge for them as they navigate the West?
I was talking to people last night. All they have to do is find. They might even need to find just one more reliable guy that they can put out, because that was who Bruce Brown was last year. It just helps to like preserve your guys. If they find two pretty reliable guys, I'm sure that would work. If you find three, fantastic. If Peyton Watson is that guy, or Christian Braun is like takes some others, whatever it looks like that's kind of all they have to do
Mm-hmm.
because everything else fits so perfectly. It's funny you mentioned LA, and I'm this is very much a tangent, but I think the thing that one of the other things along with continuity that makes Denver so good is that there is a kind of simplicity to the way that they play. It's intricate. There's times where they're running flex action for Jokic, and there's a bunch of off ball movement, but they have this go-to two-man action between Jokic and Murray that they
Mm-hmm.
can just go to every single time. They can add other guys involved. They can bring KCP in that, but just putting those two guys near each other on the floor and having Michael Porter Jr. or KCP space just simplifies things so much versus you look at LA and they're trying so many different things throughout the game. Like at some
Right.
point, okay, we're going to have Anthony Davis roll. Okay, no, actually let's use LeBron as a screener and we're going to try to use him to post up mismatches. But how are we doing this so that Denver's defense is on their toes? Like there is kind of a little bit of give or take when you have so many options. Sometimes you can almost like fry your brain, I think, in a way, in terms of like scheming and making sure you're using these counters at the right time. Versus Denver is like, we have this two-man action that I don't even know how you defend it anymore because Murray's taking a leap as a passer, so you can't trap him. You obviously, you can't drop, you can't play somebody at the level because you can find Jokic. Like there's nothing you can do against that. And look, not every team has an action that's that lethal, but there
Mm-hmm.
is such a simplicity in the way that I think that is another thing that makes them such a like sustainable team. So that does not really answer your question. I think injuries and depth would be the two things, but
Yeah.
I feel really good about them. It's hard not to after the way they looked in the first game.
No, by not answering, you answered. And I agree with you. Yeah. If someone asked me that question, I'd be like, well, if you looked at their two-man game, it's really good. But it goes back to the same point though. I think it's also become in fashion to talk about contenders as needing to experiment. Like that was the line about the Bucks before they won, that they needed to spice their sort of both their offense and defense up in various ways. We don't need to get into it during the regular season. And then they did, and they won the title. And it's this, this notch in the belt of experimentation. But wouldn't you rather like not need to experiment and not need to figure so much out? Of course. I mean, that's been a big value in Golden State is that once they experimented and figured everything out in one fell swoop when
Yep.
Steve Kerr took over. But that has given them an inherent edge, knowing how you are going to play and just executing the hell out of it. What you mentioned about finding one more guy, and maybe it's Peyton Watson, maybe it's Christian Braun. When you say reliable, what dimension are you hoping to see from, let's focus on Brown because I think
Yeah.
it's fair to say he is reliable. I mean, he got finals time and held up reasonably well. So he has the organization's trust at a certain level. What
Yeah.
dimensions to his game do you personally, not speaking for the team, obviously, but you personally would like love to see that sort of puts him in the Bruce Brown category who departed in the offseason?
Shooting for sure. And like that's just because he's spaced in the corners a lot.
Mm.
And I think I'm trying to remember what series it was, but it could have been against LA. Might have been the Lakers. They just like didn't even. It wasn't even they didn't close out to him. Like they just didn't have anybody guard him. And it's like that's you can't have that. Like you need to be. I mean, Bruce Brown was good from one of the corners, and that was all they needed because they just spaced him there and he'd make threes and he'd force closeouts eventually, or he wouldn't. He'd just continue to make threes. So I think that would be one of the things. Ball handling would be nice too. And it's funny, you actually watched Bruce Brown last year. So I covered the Nets before I covered the Nuggets. And I just say just the evolution of him as a ball handler. Whenever they had him handle the ball in Brooklyn, it did not go well.
Mm.
Versus by the end of the playoffs, they're giving him, pick and rolls with Jokic coming off the handoff. And look, like playing with Nikola Jokic as a screener is the greatest thing ever. Like it really is. I mean, it's the greatest thing ever because the big man has to play up because he's such a good shooter. And he's just excellent at placing handoffs. He's a great screener, big body. It's the greatest thing ever. But Bruce improved a lot at getting to the rim, these straight line drives, really finishing well through contact, keeping his dribble alive, not picking up too early
Yep.
before he kind of elevated. So that would be the big thing for Christian, I think, is improving that aspect of his skill set, coming off a handoff. If somebody digs down, don't let that bother your dribble. Don't pick up too early. Those are probably the things you want to see from him. And I think that will be what takes him to that next level. Is he going to replace Bruce? No, that's ridiculous. Bruce Brown is a $22 million player for a reason. He's an impact guy on both sides of the floor in multiple ways. Cutter, transition player. He can shoot the corner three. He can run the occasional pick and roll. I don't think that Christian Braun's going to do all that in 1 year. But if you can get some approximation of that and play him next to somebody like Reggie Jackson, who honestly looked pretty good yesterday, that I think is something that can work for you pretty well if you're Denver. Or Julian Strawther, who it sounds like we might talk about.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get to Julian. I think mentioning that handle improvement is very good because Christian, it's funny. He, as a prospect at Kansas, was like an excellent player. Kansas won the national title with him, obviously, but he loved to pass off his drives. He, like, when he got the ball and he hit a closeout, it was, is Oshai available? Because that was his teammate.
Yep.
Or like, is there somewhere I can place this? Which spoke obviously to his processing. I'm sure that's what attracted Denver to him partially. But another draft tenet that I subscribe to is that flaws in handle tend to be overstated if you have all the other dimensions to your game. If your principal flaw as a perimeter player is your handle, then in the NBA, there's going to be a lot more space. And as long as you belong on the court athletically and you know how to relocate and cut off of better players, which is what the NBA is full of, then you're going to be all right. Like, Denver is the nth degree example of that, obviously. But yeah, if the paint is vacated all the time, I could see how Bruce Brown is like, I could just drive straight and finish or like finish off a cut straight, and I can do that. And I don't think Christian is going to reach that level all in one season, but I think that he has all of the tools to develop in that area in a similar way, for sure. Can we talk about Peyton Watson for a second?
Yeah, we can talk about Peyton.
Let's talk about Peyton. Peyton is a very interesting player because, as we'll get to with Strawther, Tyson, Jalen Pickett, these are really established college players. I think the youngest out of those three was Julian. He was at Gonzaga, I believe, 3 years. Christian Braun, Kansas, 3 years, national champion. Peyton Watson, I mean, Zeke was a one and done, but Zeke's been able to just sort of sit and not really be relied upon heavily until now. Now he's sort of whatever he is, 21, 22 years old. The age of those other guys were coming into the league. Peyton is still very young. And I don't know that like Denver has necessarily, I mean, maybe they've been hyping him up a little bit. They've been hyping up a little bit, but more in the like, we're really excited about him. We think he's going to be a fit for our stuff. So in terms of the offensive end of the floor, because you mentioned, Christian Braun, who's had more of a shooting pedigree coming from Kansas than Peyton had coming from UCLA, certainly, still got like ignored as much as a team could ignore someone. I would expect that Peyton gets much of the same treatment. So what do you believe is the Nuggets' plan for integrating him to where he can keep this offensive machine like mostly running smoothly, understanding there's a bit of a drop off, but how does he function in that machine?
That's a good question. I mean, he's going to be a big transition force for them.
Of course.
So I think leak outs is number one. I don't know if they have that answer yet, to be truthful. Just looking at his shot, he's changed his form quite a bit. There's a lot more of like a leg sway, and he's kind of slowed his just mechanics down a little bit. Seems like it's a little more in line. Who knows if the results are going to come this year? But in terms of how they plan to develop him, I think, and it's just based on this was what they were doing in preseason. It seems like they want to develop him a little bit more as a four, and a four in their system is largely what Aaron Gordon's doing, where he's cutting, he's in the dunker spot. They were doing this a lot with him in preseason, and I think because that's the lowest hanging fruit. Because right now it's like if he's playing the three, you need to shoot the three ball well. He's spacing in the corners. If you're not quite sure if that development's going to happen this year, next thing you do, all right, let's make him a guy that's in the dunker, a guy that if he's on the wing, he's going to be cutting on a 45-degree angle towards the rim or cutting along the baseline. Like those are kind of the things that it seems like they're looking for him to do. He's not screening or anything like that. So it's really just kind of gap filling in a way. And it seems like that's kind of what they're looking for him to do. But I think just watching Peyton, I don't know what Peyton's like, where he's going to excel offensively just yet. It's like, it's a little record scratchy at certain times where he'll catch the ball in the perimeter and he'll travel, or he'll jab step when he has an open 3-pointer. Sometimes when he puts his head down to get to the rim, he's purely, it's like he's looking at the rim. It's tunnel vision. He's not looking if anybody's space. He's not looking at the low man's helping over. And that's fine. He's really young. He's barely played. So those are normal things, I think, for a player of his age. But it'll be really interesting to see how they can bring him up to speed with everybody. And I think the smartest way to do that and what they're doing is just have him play in the gaps and be athletic and play above the rim.
Yeah, he is the most sort of reminiscent of what the Warriors have tried to do with Jonathan Kuminga. Yeah. I've compared those two players before. I mean, there's obviously nuances to their games. I think Kuminga has sort of the aspirations of a deeper bag than Peyton Watson does, however misguided those aspirations might be from time to time. But like in terms of ultra athletic player who can slide between the 3 and the 4, whose principal value sort of should be defensive and can be this sort of play finisher on offense, you can see a lot of similarities. It's much better, of course, to draft that player 30th than to draft that player 7th, but we can leave that to the side. I think that what you're describing about trying to, number one, find the right role for him offensively, number 2, get him to excel within that role, I think that is a very steep ask to do in like the same season that you are trying to repeat for a title. I think
I agree.
Any sort of playoff viability that Peyton might have in a given series is sort of just gravy for this team. And it's actually why I think that Strawther, but to a greater extent, Tyson, are very interesting additions to this team. So, I mean, Strawther, preseason darling, obviously with, everything went in that he was shooting, and he was shooting off the dribble. He was shooting from deep, deep range. He showed such an intelligence with his cuts and in drawing contact, despite not being the most physically overwhelming guy. I think that he will find his way to minutes, especially as players get nicked up. He'll get looks this year. But Tyson, Tyson is one that I can't really shake. For those who are unacquainted with Hunter Tyson, he's about 6'8", 6'9", sort of traditional stretch power forward from Clemson, who is not the shooter that Julian Strawther is, because he can't shoot off movement. Strawther's are not the way that Julian can. Julian's release is quicker, and he can sort of get it off after, a dead sprint, turn your shoulders and hoist. And there's a little hitch in Hunter's jumper that I think makes that harder. I think that Hunter can probably be a relocation shooter, but that's about it. And even so, him being 6'9", his ability already to cut a little bit, he's got more pop at the rim than you'd assume looking at him. He was in college 5 years because he got that extra COVID year of eligibility. And I can understand why the Nuggets promised him as early in the process as they did. And again, I'm sure you know this, but other listeners may not know that seemed to be in the works very early on, that they're like, Hunter can fit in here. He's our guy. I can see a world where, as sort of a 10 to 12 minute a night bench guy, or sort of maybe a fill-in guy if someone else is getting nicked up, I can see him sort of supplanting some of Peyton's minutes, maybe even taking that role for this year, because I have so much faith in him keeping that offensive machine moving. Like, he keeps their greatest strength very, very strong. Like, what is the team's view of Tyson? How do you think that he can fit in, like, getting some run, some real run in the rotation this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're high on him and drafted him for a reason. I kind of talk to people the character, which is like, they really like there's a belief in his character and confidence. I think that was the thing that I gathered, that we can sit here, we can talk about like the shooting and just the kind of floor spaces, but that was the thing that I kept hearing about, which whether I don't know how much that factors into people's process with certain prospects or not with prospects, but like that was the thing I kept hearing about, was just they really liked his confidence and how much he believed in himself. It's funny you mentioned Peyton. Like Peyton, for me, I have like I don't want to say I have like low expectations, but I'm also like understanding that he's a really young player that is good on one side of the floor and is figuring it out.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I think it's totally found money if he's a contributor versus like Tyson, what he's going to do. I think the big thing for me with him will just be speed of the game. If you watch him in preseason, it just felt like that side of things was like a little bit of a development point for him already, but that's something, maybe he adjusts to game 10, game 20. Those are kind of the things I'm watching for with him. I like that you brought up the timing on his shot. It does. I wonder, like, if you look at the next couple of years of Hunter Tyson's career, I do wonder if he speeds up his shot a little bit, because that was for all the height and the height and the spacing that he offers. It doesn't feel like he can get his shot off as quickly. And then defensively, just being able to stay in front of guys. I think those are the main things I'm watching for. But yeah, I think he has a real chance to play for them. I don't think he's going to be like a huge, minutes guy for them. I think you're probably right about like 8 to 10 range. But it does seem like those things, if he can figure those out early, just being able to get his shots off in time and staying with everything defensively, I think those will be the key things for him.
Yeah. And just so in the interest of full disclosure here, both Tyson and Strawther are guys that I was too low on in this draft. Just for me, so I can take my L's like a big boy when they occur. Strawther was a guy I did multiple episodes on, including like, I feel like summer of 21 or summer of 22, I did an episode on Strawther. And I did not see the athletic pop that I thought was necessary to play in the league. And he's skinny, and I think he profiles as being pretty skinny. So maybe that will always be an issue that limits his ceiling, but man alive, the cutting and like the decisiveness in getting to the hoop and being able to get to the line a few times in preseason are what like stunned me. I knew his shot was good, but oh my God. Again, a perfect scouting job by the Nuggets and by, most of the people who evaluate the draft on Twitter. I think I was on the lower end. Shouts to our mutual friend CT Fazio. But I just think that is such a perfect fit for someone who, whatever he's going to be, the best version of him will be in Denver, which is what you hear about so many, basically everyone there now. But that's like such an intentional hand in glove kind of fit.
It's great.
What are you excited about
with Julian? It's funny. There was his summer league was kind of up and down. Like he did the first 2 games, he just didn't hit any shots. And that kind of like tanked his numbers because you're only looking at like a 5-game sample. But it was his last game of summer league against the Knicks. They had him handle the ball a bunch. He looked pretty good, like coming off handoffs, running pick and roll, even taking it full court off rebounds, running pick and roll with the big man, making these little like dump off reads, little pocket passes. He looked pretty good doing that. I didn't know that was part of, I'm not like a draft guy in general, but based on what I've read about him and stuff like that, I just didn't know that was part of his game. So, and the other thing was that he did really well was take down rebounds, go full court, and just drive fearlessly into contact. He is a fearless player, which is what you brought up. I like that. The thing I like about him is the deep floor spacing, which is so important on this specific team with how much they go to two-man action. If you have Julian Strawther spacing 28 feet out, good luck nail helping. Like good luck helping down at the nail on Jokic and Jamal. Like you just because that guy's gonna space out there. Not only that, he's another guy that can come off handoffs, which they obviously like to run with Jokic. It's one of their better plays. That's a guy that can come off a handoff and he can hit shots where his feet aren't even set or he's taking one dribble and like falling to the side. I mean, this guy is like a legit movement shooter, a deep floor spacer. I don't really know if they have anybody on the roster. I mean, they have guys that like space the floor really well, but like 28 feet out is, I guess, Jamal on certain plays, but like
I would say Porter. I mean, Porter's got that in him. Whether it always shows up is different, but yeah.
But like Julian is like he's really consistently, and he's like coming off relocations, like running towards half court, turning and hitting 28-foot bombs. Like it is, he is a real deal deep shooter, and I don't know, man. I mean, if you look at especially the makeup of their bench right now, which is mostly defensive guys with Christian Braun and Peyton Watson, Zeke Nnaji, like that guy is going to be such a boost of energy and just like necessary offensive juice. It's just like it's tough not to be high on him, honestly.
Yeah, and all the like any sort of archetype you can imagine seems to make sense alongside Jokic. I mean, that's the benefit of Jokic, but it's funny that guy, you know, that movement shooting specialist archetype that comes into the league. You know, we've seen players like that. I think Shamet comes to mind recently as a guy who made an impact his rookie year. Kennard a little bit is kind of like that. I mean, he's got a little bit more to his game, but the player, like movement shooters can be sort of enticing to a fault during the draft process, because if you are billing yourself as a specialist, then it's like, okay, come to the NBA where the people who are specialists in the NBA are like 29, have been doing it for 7 years, and whose footwork is perfect, and who condition themselves to hell every summer. Like, it's just hard to get going. And so he will be another interesting test case. Number one, for if the specialist label was unfair to him because of the stuff you mentioned in summer league, which I think might be the case. You know, one of the things that Gonzaga is that he never passed because they only had him used as the specialist. And usually in college, if that's the way you're used, it's because that's all you can do. It's rare to find the guy whose, you know, talents are being really suppressed, but who has all this shooting talent. So it'll be interesting to see how much more he's got in the bag, number one, and how easily he assimilates into his role. Because the other thing about those movement shooting specialists in the league is they tend to bounce around. And there's a reason why they do, because most of them are at something of an athletic deficiency, and they can find their way in the league, but they got to sort of reach their physical prime before they can consistently do so. They got to be 24, 25, 26, 27 before they, you know exactly who they are. If Strawther manages to buck that, if the Nuggets can sort of sidestep that normal developmental hurdle that a lot of these guys face just because they have such a, you know, a euphoric or like development structure, then it'll like, I may just have to end the podcast, man. I just have to be like Denver, and that's it. But something I'm certainly interested in looking at with him.
For sure.
Something else. I mean, we're talking a lot about their bench, but that's where my mind's going right now. So correct me if I'm wrong, because you've rewatched this game more closely than I have, but their bench lineups did a lot of switch everything on defense. Right. And a lot of that obviously comes down from having a big who can do it, which is Nnaji. So do you think that, you know, when we talked before about like what could a possible hiccup be, do you expect, you know, you're going to be asking, I'm sure, like Reggie Jackson to switch a decent amount, and you're like, it's asking a lot just to have guys hold up in those actions. I understand the wisdom of it because it takes the opposing offense out of their stuff. Usually a bench offense is a little less organized. Again, you're counting on lack of continuity against these other teams. But when you get into the playoffs and teams are a bit more comfortable in what they do, do you feel like Nnaji and that switch everything style is going to be able to hold up?
Um, I think you'll shorten the rotation
You
is
do.
probably the answer.
Yeah.
And I think you do what you did last year, which is Aaron Gordon's your 5. Um, Now you were able to do that because he's playing next to Jeff Green, and both of those guys are kind of the 5, as in they're
Sure.
like switching out, and then the other one's kind of rebounding. So maybe Najee's that guy next to AG. I don't know, but yeah, it's something I'm concerned about in the sense it's not even it's the defensive side of the floor I'm worried about. It's just more like what offensive structure do you have on the other side?
Mm-hmm.
Because you either play, I mean, you could stagger like MPJ and Jamal together, but right now they're kind of aligning their rotations so that it's Reggie and Jamal, and those are like two smaller guards. Thought it was fine yesterday because Reggie got like a 7-foot wingspan. Crazy, like he's got long arms. I just didn't know till today. I looked it up. I was like, that is surreal. So I mean, he's like disruptive, and Jamal I thought was pretty decent defensively yesterday. But it's like there are going to be teams that are going to be. I mean, you look at like talk about the Lakers or the Heat, like they just put Jamal in action every single time, and we're like, all
Mm-hmm.
right, we're just gonna post up Jamal Murray time after time after time after game. So I mean, that's kind of the pitfalls of like you're running a switch everything, and there might be two guys you can do that with Jamal and Reggie if they're out there. But yeah, I think it's something I worry about in that you are giving the opponent more chances to post up
Mm-hmm.
your smaller guards per se. But it's the other side of the floor that I'm probably looking at more is like how do they find an identity there that isn't just we're going to force a turnover and try to get to the rim as fast as we can. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, so last year, refresh my memory, when Jokic was off the floor in the playoffs, was Jamal on the floor basically the entirety of that time, or did they bench he and Jamal like semi frequently?
oh God, I want to say they kept him pretty split. I'm sure there were minutes where Bruce, because they would do things too where they'd have like Bruce and Yoke aligned.
Mm-hmm.
So they do stuff like that. Uh, but yeah, I want to say they were pretty good about splitting them. I don't know. I'm not like the rotation guy. So there are other people like my guy Ryan Blackburn does like rotation, like spreadsheets every single game. Like he would know that stuff right there. So go check him out, Ryan Blackburn on Twitter. He'll have all that figured out.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. So I assuming that they do try to split Jokic and Murray as much as possible, like do you feel as though you said you're concerned about it? Like I would think that they would try to keep Murray with Gordon a lot. And this isn't just playoffs, this is regular season. Just because I would imagine that Gordon is the second best screener on the team behind Jokic that's
Yes.
going to get regular run. And that's, you want to give Murray as much of an advantage as possible, right? So do you anticipate that, or you think there's going to be a lot of bench lineups where Murray's really, bringing a lot of these other pieces along?
I can see that for sure. Because again, I think Gordon, you're going to eventually settle in your five. Maybe Zeke. Like the thing with Zeke is kind of similar to the Peyton thing, where you're like, you just need to find the thing that he does offensively.
Mm-hmm.
Like first couple of years, all right, he's going to be our stretch big. That doesn't quite translate. All right, now we're trying to we're kind of on the fly, trying to turn him into like a dribble handoff hub and like guy that we can play in like delay sets, similar to what we do with Nikola. We'll see how that goes. So if that doesn't come along this year with Zeke and it does take him more time, then yeah, I do think you're going to play AG as that backup 5, which means those minutes with Jamal are going to be aligned. And then you can go to 2-man action between those two guys. And it
Mm-hmm.
might actually be a blessing in disguise, honestly, because AG is a high flyer and a good screener.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Of course, I mean, the Nuggets make a lot of sense. So
Good team.
what is there, and this is my fault for not doing all of the research about the tax and the second tax and all that stuff. But I know what their contracts are for the individual players. I think Porter makes 33. His next 3 years are 35, 38, 40. Gordon is making about 21, 22, and that's about where he is next year. And then I believe he has a player option. Caldwell Pope has a player option after this season. So I know that the organization is just focusing on the next game. They want to have as good a season as they possibly can this year. That's the focus. But is there any has there been any stated intent from ownership as to like their commitment to keeping this five together? Like when they talk about it, is it a core five, or do they talk about basically Murray and Nikola?
Core five. They have been the line best starting five in the league has been used an ungodly amount of times in in like 2 weeks. I mean, and it's because they're all in on it. So yeah, if they can keep everybody together, I think they're going to do that. And I largely think that's why they're trying to hit on guys in the draft, because then you have these like, essentially controlled contracts where
Yeah, of
guys are on
course.
rookie scale deals. So I mean, I think that's kind of why, is because the starting five is good, and you want to keep them together for as long as those guys are in their primes. So I think that's the vision is for sure those five.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know what I think KCP's contract is for something in the teens, maybe the mid-teens, his player option, which, you know, by market standards, he should decline. Gordon, if he has another year shooting as well as he shot last year, and a playoff run like he had last year, he should decline his, and stuff will, get expensive. And I don't want to, put any skepticism out into the world. Certainly, I would just love to see Denver be able to have like three more runs with this group. When you win a title and the whole team comes back and everyone's on the same page, which, again, this is another credit to Jokic, because he, teams often take on the personality of their best player a little bit. And he's like, let's just play ball. Let's hoop. Let's go. This is like, I don't want to call it like the fun year, but they're like, you've gotten over the hump. Everything is lined up for you. And in my opinion, Boston's going to be very good. Milwaukee's going to be very good, of course. Facing any team in the finals that you don't play a lot in the regular season is going to be a challenge. So nothing is guaranteed. But this is when, like, if there's going to be a 62 win Nuggets team, if that team is out there, this would be the year,
Yeah,
because everything is lined up for that to happen. Like I put out my predictions before I watched that game. I would have changed them if I'd seen that Laker game. But I had the Nuggets as the 2 seed with 51 wins, because I bought a little bit into this bench question mark narrative, and they'll prioritize health and la da 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 da. I'm ready to toss that in the garbage and think that they're going to be much better. Like, what are sort of the heights you think they could get to in the regular season?
I don't think they're going to be a 60. Well, I don't know. I don't want to say that, but they could be. They could do that. I think I asked Malone this preseason, because they are such an interesting team where they have 3 rookies, 2 sophomores, is how do you prioritize development while competing? And especially knowing that you have the home court advantage that you do with altitude, um, and how much that played a role in last year. I mean, shoot, they lost 1 home game the whole playoff run, and it was because it was game 2 of the finals, and they. I don't want to say they didn't try, but they didn't. It wasn't the hardest I saw the Nuggets play. They played harder in regular season games that I caught, and I didn't catch a lot of them. So, um, yeah, I think there's such a huge advantage of that it favors you big time to be at the top of the standings if you're Denver, a little bit extra because of that home court advantage, because of the altitude change. Um, so I think that'll be interesting to see. But I will say, I think the development factor will be big for them. They've put a lot of chips center table on their young guys being productive. So that might cost you certain games or certain nights. Possessions will add up. So I don't know. I don't know if this year will be the year that they go on like a huge regular season tear, but yeah, I mean, the playoffs, like it's such a solid formula. The biggest thing they need is health in that setting, and like 1 or 2 guys, as I mentioned.
Yeah. Well, I again, it's a great line to say we want to balance development with winning, but I've never met Coach Malone, obviously, but just from my view, thousands of miles away, like he demands sort of defensive accountability,
Yep.
execution, and like that dude likes winning games. At the end of the
Oh yeah.
day, he likes winning games. And with between Christian Braun, who obviously is a locked member of the rotation, Reggie, who seems like a locked member of the rotation, and Nnaji, who I think is his extension speaks to the fact that he's a pretty locked member of the rotation. Like that is 8 guys already. So, and Peyton is gonna play. Maybe Hunter gets some of those minutes, but injuries aside, I don't know there are as many minutes available. Maybe that's why we haven't discussed Jalen Pickett yet, but I don't know that there are as many minutes available for all 3 of these rookies to play a lot. But I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. I think any minutes they get will be minutes that they are basically earn. And I think that, having that degree of at least certainty in that top 8 insulates them a little bit from, being submarined by rookie minutes so that they suffer a 3-game losing streak or something like that. I don't know. I believe more in the buffer than I did like a week ago.
Yeah, I can see it. But I mean, I think it's a good thing. You have to earn your minutes. And
of course, yeah.
Reggie's looked good so far, but older player. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's quite as set in stone. And I mean, we're locking Christian Braun, and we don't know. I mean, it's his second year. Like sophomore slumps happen. I don't know. I don't think it's as locked in yet. And it seems, and it really just like hearing from Malone and how they view it. And I know how Malone is. Like Malone will, if he doesn't feel like somebody's playing well, he won't play him. Like,
of course,
that'll be
right.
that.
Yeah.
He's like he wants you said it. He wants to win. He wants guys that are contribute. So I think there'll be opportunity, and it's a long season, and they'll want to give their main guys rest if they can, and not so much rest days, but like rest in games where you're kind of ideally giving your starters less minutes. So that means more opportunity. That means deeper rotation. So I think there is opportunity. I don't know. I've gotten that feeling. Just there's a level of patience this year.
You are most likely right. I probably shouldn't have said I want to throw my old prediction in the trash. I just, man,
it's hard though.
The 2013 Heat that won 33 regular season games, the 2016 Warriors that won 73, the 2009 Celtics that were like whatever they were, some ridiculous record before KG got hurt. I just love those teams. I love the first year after the title team that is just ready to steamroll. I get that the Nuggets are going to be smart about it. I'm not saying they shouldn't be smart about it. I'm saying there is a part of me, a small part of me that thinks even in trying to quote unquote do it the right way, like they still run into 60 wins, which is what I'm really hoping for this team. Like
they might.
Talk to me just about being, because you joined the organization, you said in March, right? So you're still like baby faced as far as your experience in Denver. What is that arena like just since March, which is like the doldrums of the regular season, through the playoffs, through like the ring ceremony? Like, do you expect the crowd in that arena, insert whatever joke about, Denver being a Broncos town or whatever, but do you expect that crowd to be like really hot the whole year and like packed most of the year? What sort of an environment can we expect in this year?
I think so. I mean, I think if there's ever a year to do it,
right?
Year, right?
Yes, yes,
yeah.
Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've only been here so long, so I don't know I barely know what the regular season crowds are like. But yeah, I mean, crowd is great for the Lakers game. Excellent. I mean, it's ring night, so of course. But yeah, I think the crowd's gonna be big. And this team, I mean, they really might sleepwalk into like 60 wins. Like They now, because now they know what they have, what it takes. They believe in that, and there's just a level of familiarity with that starting five. They just
Yeah.
didn't play that much for last year. Now it's like, all right, 20 playoff games, lost 4 of them. We're going to carry that into next year. Like, I would assume if they're playing really well, and I think we both think they can, that's going to get big crowds. So I do think the crowd will be a big factor.
And, again, I'm dreaming on this right now, but I'm hoping that even if there's a tendency within the organization to like take it a little easy, that at least at home, their crowd won't let them, for whatever, again, narrative that's existed in the NBA about how home court advantage, you mentioned one of the few genuine home court advantages, and home court advantage is not what it used to be, smartphones, whatever. Like, I just love when a team is so good at home that like winning in that building, if a team can come in and win a road game in that environment, that it's like a huge marker for that team on their season. Like those games at Oracle before they got the new arena in Golden State, I would get exhausted watching those games, watching how hard everyone had to play to try to beat that team. I'm not saying I'm going to be rooting for teams to beat the Nuggets this year, but I want that sort of final boss environment because it makes watching the games so much more engaging and fun when you're like, everything's in sync. They have the best player in the world. They've got this inherent advantage because of altitude. They know it. The crowd knows it. They know that they're more prepared than the team that's coming in. The other team is gunning with everything they got because they know what a climate's going to be. Like, I want that. And I really think that this could be the year. I'm sorry. I should be like asking you an intelligent question based on your experience. I'm sorry. I'm like
I just
fanboying
only have
at
so
you.
much. No, dude, like I know as much as you about this, some of this stuff. I don't
Yeah, man. Like,
know.
can you personally make sure that all of this happens? Is that too much? Can you just personally make sure they win 61? That's all I'm looking for,
Listen,
man.
yeah, I'm sure the writing on nuggets.com is going to be what fuels them. Like, we got to make this guy happy. Can't, can't drop this Tuesday game to the Charlotte Hornets. We got to make sure, make his life good.
Speaking of, your writing on nuggets.com, what is some of the stuff that you've gotten to do here preseason? What is some of the stuff that people can look forward to in the early regular season? What's on tap?
Dude, honestly, I've been super busy with like ring night stuff. I did a lot of like writing for that. So I'm not sure yet. I am gonna do like a weekly film deep dive series for the website. So we haven't launched that or announced that or even really gone into it that much yet, but it'll be called Film Fridays. So we'll be doing that. So that'll
Love
just
it.
be things I noticed throughout the week. I watched every game back. So little takeaways that I've had. Other than that, I'm just excited to get started. We have a video series on the Nuggets YouTube called Nuggets Knowledge. We did breakdowns from Summer League for a couple of guys we mentioned on this podcast, Julian Strawther, Hunter Tyson, third guy that we didn't talk about too much, Jalen Pickett as well.
Mhm.
So that was a fun thing that we're going to continue to do throughout the year, kind of like thinking basketball style stuff. It's been really fun. And then other than that, I don't know. The season kind of tells a story for you, is what I always say. So there'll be a bunch of film stuff that will be, interviewed things. Did a lot of interviews preseason with these guys, talk about their off season. So it's all on nuggets.com or any other Nuggets platform, Nuggets YouTube, Instagram. Maybe we'll be doing a couple of shorts, but really those are the two places I'm writing or creating stuff for the most is YouTube, nuggets.com.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you, Matt. That did put one more question in my head. You said you've been doing a lot of interviews with all these players. What is there anyone that stuck out? This is sort of a nice, preseason hype softball for you. But like, is there any player who just based on what they said their summer was like or what they were up to, you feel like is ready for a particularly huge year relative to expectations for that player? Anyone that stuck out?
But, no, and that sounds like a bad thing, but
No.
like
I mean,
it seems
expectations
like
are high,
everybody's
especially on this podcast for the Nuggets. So,
it seems like everybody's pretty smart about what they need to work on. Like MPJ said, ball handling, we'll see what that translates into. Christian Braun also said ball handling, but ball handling is like doing stuff on the second side and like straight line driving to the rim or taking the ball up off a rebound. So it seems like the development is pretty reasonable. I guess the guy you could watch for is Peyton Watson, who we spent some time on, but I think he's still kind of even like figuring out what his skill set would be for him to decide, all right, I'm going to develop this and I'm going to become this type of player. So
Yeah.
I didn't get that sense, but it just seems like they're really good at conveying what they expect of guys and then having those guys like, all right, we're going to go work on this. So Christian Braun, we're going to want you to be Bruce Brown. We're not going to be like, hey, can you run, 20 pick and rolls in the game? We're going to be like, can you come off a handoff on the second side and get to the rim on a straight line drive? So, yeah, I wouldn't say there's going to be any like big breakout. I mean, you never know. You just don't know with the NBA, but I didn't get that feeling. I just got more of like, all right, these guys are prepared to fill the gaps from the losses of Jeff Green and Bruce Brown. And this organization is really smart about figuring out exactly how to do that with their existing guys.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, man. Anything else that you want to talk Pickett a little bit? Is it like, what do you got?
I don't know a lot. I don't know a lot, man. Look, he's a really smart player. Speed of the game is a big thing for him. He's an interesting style where he plays with his back to the basket so much.
Yes. Yeah.
But he's smaller. And I'm curious to see how that'll translate to the NBA. Really good pick and roll player. So maybe the development for him is just playing faster and like kind of Xing that aspect of his game out where he's playing with his back to the basket because you're just like taking too much time off the shot clock. I don't know. Like if he was like 6'7" and he's backing guys down, like I love that. If you're 6'3", 6'2", I don't know. It's depends who I guess you're matched up with. But yeah, I mean, I think for him, speed of the game will be the big thing. I'd expect him to spend time in Grand Rapids, their G League team, and just kind of get up to speed and figure out how he's going to contribute. I don't think he's going to be a guy that'll be in the rotation in the first 20 games. But yeah, I mean, if he can figure out pace, and that's the thing that's been stressed to him a lot, I think he has a chance because he's a really smart player, like just great passer, really, really smart pick and roll player, good scorer from a good shooter, good mid-range player. Getting the rim, we'll see. Again, size and speed of the game is the big thing that'll decide his future there. But yeah, for me, I'm kind of like, all right, I'm not looking at him to be a guy that's going to be playing a lot initially for sure.
Yeah, me neither. But he was basically, there was no like monster jump for him in college. He set foot on a college basketball court and was instantly productive and was just a metronome year after year after year until eventually he transferred to Penn State and was still excellent. But aesthetics are certainly a clash for how the Nuggets play, for how most NBA teams play. That was always the question with him. But, production at his level tends to figure itself out. But how it happens in this particular organization, yeah, we'll see for sure.
I agree.
Matt Brooks, thank you so much, man, for joining. Really appreciate the time. Yeah, hope to have you back, when they're 45-2, like I think they might be.
Let's manifest it. I'm down. Yeah, this is great. I just want to talk about these guys. So definitely hit me up whenever you need a guest.
All right, thanks, man. Thank you all for listening. This has been Chucking Darts. It is okay to be wrong about sports. Find your dartboard and start chucking. Thank you.